Speaking of political celebrity, Mark, you wrote this cover story on Hillary Clinton, and in the cover story, you said that she was done with being careful. Do you think that's true?
Well, she said that last year when she was promoting her book, and she said she found it frustrating, and she thought voters found it frustrating. We haven't seen it to this point at all in this campaign cycle. And look, I mean, there is this weird fetish we have in the political system, especially around people like Trump or even Chris Christie, the celebration of I'm going to tell it like it is. I'm the truth teller in this race. And I think a lot of people can see right through that. A lot of people can't, but look, Hillary Clinton, I think for those who have seen her privately and publicly, and even journalists who have seen her in less plugged-in settings, will tell you that there is a much different version of the Hillary Clinton that we see on TV.
But we're not seeing that version on the as you captured. We are not seeing that version on the campaign trail. You watch her CNN interview, which is the only national television interview, and she looked like she was sitting in the dentist chair. This is not a candidate who is running, as Jeb Bush said, joyfully. But she's running carefully.
Do people really care about that, though, Gwen?
Well, it's interesting when you look at the two extremes of this race. You have Donald Trump, who is appealing to people who aspire to be billionaires, and you have Bernie Sanders, who is appealing to people who hate billionaires, and they're both staking out these opposite ends. Somewhere in the middle, the person who's going to be the nominee by the party doesn't necessarily demean billionaires or embrace billionaires. Look at the Wall Street folks who lined up to support Hillary Clinton. This is the sweet spot everybody, the serious candidates, are aiming for.
Right. You know, another person on that spectrum of wealth is you've got Donald Trump talking about how rich he is, and then Scott Walker, Robert, this week announced for president. He can't go through an event without talking about the Kohl's coupons that he clips. He's running on the sort of the Winnebagos and the discount shirt. What's the Scott Walker's story? What are his chances?
When you talk to Walker's advisors, their sense is eventually Trump's going to implode, and the party's going to look to someone who has a blue-collar appeal, a little bit of a populist edge, and they think he's a conservative warrior. He's won 3 elections in Wisconsin, but they're nervous about Trump. They're nervous about the crowded field. They think as much as he may be an everyman candidate, that may not be enough, and so they're trying to maybe think, how can he become exciting? How can he start to really get more out of his base?
One way he didn't do it was just now in this comment when he denounced Trump, and he used the word denounce with less force than I've ever heard it employed. I denounce him.
This was Scott Walker's week, right? You were there, I think,
yes.
At his launch, and we're not talking about Scott Walker. We're talking about Donald Trump.
But does anyone make a voting determination based on who denounced Donald Trump more or less than the next guy?
I think people get a gestalt of what they think a candidate's character is, and my argument would be that how they respond is a piece of their character.
That's right. It may not be the denunciation, but Robert, wasn't there an opportunity for someone like Jeb Bush to really promote his brand, which is the I'm not Donald Trump? They put out a little video this week of Jeb Bush talking about the tone, but wouldn't this have been an opportunity for Jeb Bush to stand up and make a bigger noise?
It was certainly an opportunity, and how Bush responded tells us a lot about Bush. One, I think he's reluctant, if you talk to his allies, to engage in a major way with Trump, because if you enter a boxing ring with Trump, you could emerge bloodied. I mean, at this point in the summer, does Bush really want to have a major fight with Donald Trump? I don't think so. And I think when he looks at his own candidacy, he's not someone who's out there fighting. He's not a combative politician, and he hopes eventually the party comes back to someone who's a little more even-tempered.
And doesn't he also think that 4 years ago, our conversation that summer was about Michelle Bachmann, who is not president, last I checked?
Right.
Exactly.
So your point is that there are these summer flavors that go away.
There's one other thing that happened this week that I think we should talk about, which is this really bizarre encounter that Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley had, the two other Democratic, or three, there's other Democratic candidates, at Netroots Nation, where so you have this segment of the Republican Party that seems to be semi-large that's supporting Trump, but then you had on the other side also folks who are not going to get the nomination being shouted down while they were denouncing billionaires, while they were calling for an increase in the minimum wage by the Black Lives Matter folks. And that was just a sort of outburst of unreasonableness on the left side of the party.
And neither one of them handled terribly well.
And I think
explain the nature of their complaint, though. This is at the kind of base of the Democratic Party.
And they are saying things that the base should be cheering, but there is a group that is shouting them down during their speech because they are not talking only about Black Lives Matter and the issue.
Or at all, to be fair.
Well, they might have gotten to it on their own. But it seemed to me watching this week, it was like the extremes of both parties had some kind of secret meeting where they got together and said, how can we most alienate normal voters? And they did a pretty good job.
All right, a week of alienation. We'll hope for harmony and community later. Thanks, all of you. We'll be right back with some analysis on the Iran deal. Stay with us.